American teacher freed from Russia. What really happened? For over 3 years, an American teacher sat behind bars in a Russian prison, caught in the middle of rising tensions between two of the world's biggest superpowers. Marc Fogel, an international educator with decades of experience, was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to an astonishing 14 years in prison, all for carrying a small amount of medical marijuana. His case was overshadowed by other high-profile American detainees, and for a long time it seemed that his fate was sealed. But now, in a sudden and unexpected turn of events, Marc Fogel has finally been freed. His release has sparked intense debate about how the US and Russia negotiate prisoner exchanges, who was responsible for securing his freedom, and whether secret diplomatic deals were struck behind closed doors. Some believe his release is a diplomatic victory, while others see it as another example of Moscow using American prisoners as bargaining chips. So, what really happened? And what does this mean for the future of US-Russia relations? Who is Marc Fogel? The teacher caught in a geopolitical storm. Marc Fogel wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a political operative. He wasn't a spy. He was simply an educator, one who had spent years teaching at international schools across the world, including in Colombia, Malaysia, and Russia. By all accounts, he was well respected by his students and colleagues, but in August 2021, Fogel's life took a devastating turn. When he arrived at Sheremetyevo Airport in Moscow, he was stopped by Russian authorities, who discovered 17 grams of medical marijuana in his luggage. Fogel, who was in his 60s at the time, insisted that the cannabis was prescribed to him for chronic pain relief following multiple surgeries. However, Russian authorities showed no mercy. He was arrested and charged with drug smuggling, an offence that in Russia carries extreme penalties, especially for foreign nationals. The Russian court sentenced him to 14 years in a penal colony, a harsh punishment usually reserved for major drug traffickers. For his family and supporters, this was a clear case of injustice. Many believed that Fogel's case was politically motivated, with Russia using his imprisonment as leverage against the US. But despite numerous appeals and outcry from human rights organizations, his fate seemed forgotten. The forgotten American, why was he left behind? As Fogel languished in a Russian prison, other Americans were being freed. In December 2022, WNBA star Brittany Griner was released in a high-profile prisoner swap, exchanged for Victor Bout, a notorious Russian arms dealer known as the Merchant of Death. At the time, many Americans asked, what about Marc Fogel? His case received far less media attention, and despite efforts by his family and advocates, he was not classified as wrongfully detained by the US State Department, a crucial designation that could have helped fast-track negotiations for his release. Critics accused the Biden administration of prioritizing celebrity cases over ordinary Americans, a claim the White House denied. For years, Fogel's supporters pleaded for help, but their calls seemed to fall on deaf ears. That is, until now. The prisoner exchange, what we know. After years of silence, the news finally broke. Marc Fogel was coming home. His release, however, was not as widely publicized as past prisoner swaps, leading many to speculate that it was part of a secret deal between Washington and Moscow. But what do we actually know? According to reports, Fogel's release was part of a larger US-Russia prisoner exchange, though the exact details remain classified. Some sources claim the Biden administration played a role, while others suggest that former President Donald Trump intervened in the process. In a public statement, Fogel's mother personally thanked Trump, saying he kept his promise. This statement has sparked debate. Was Trump truly involved in securing Fogel's release? If so, what role did the Biden administration play? And more importantly, who did the US give up in return? As of now, details remain scarce, but one thing is clear: Russia never does anything for free. Was this a diplomatic gesture or a strategic move? Whenever a US citizen is released from Russian custody, one key question always arises: why now? Russia, under Vladimir Putin, has a history of using American prisoners as bargaining chips. Given the current geopolitical climate, marked by the Ukraine war, economic sanctions, and rising global tensions, it is highly likely that Russia demanded something significant in return. So, was this a humanitarian gesture or a strategic move? Some experts suggest that Fogel's release could be linked to ongoing backdoor negotiations between Washington and Moscow, perhaps concerning future trade agreements, prisoner swaps, or even sanctions relief. Others argue that Russia is carefully choosing which Americans to release, using cases like Fogel's to create divisions in US politics by fueling debate over who gets freed and why. Regardless of the motivations, Fogel's release proves one thing: the US and Russia are still talking, despite their tensions on the world stage. What happens next? Marc Fogel is finally free, but the larger issue remains. How many more Americans are being used as political pawns in foreign prisons? Currently, several US citizens remain detained in Russia, including Paul Whelan, a former US Marine accused of espionage, and Evan Gershkovich, a Wall Street Journal journalist facing charges of spying. Their fates remain uncertain. The question is, how many more Americans will be arrested, imprisoned, and used as leverage in geopolitical negotiations? And at what point does diplomacy become a dangerous game of hostage exchanges? One thing is certain: this isn't the last time we'll see a US-Russia prisoner swap.